For these problems, we're going to find the quotient using the standard algorithm, and then we're going to write the remainder. Remember, an algorithm is just a set of memorized steps that will allow you to solve a problem. For division, we call it the long division algorithm. And the long division algorithm is made up of 6 different steps. The first step is to divide, and then multiply, and then subtract, and then you're going to check, and then you're going to bring down. To help you remember the steps, a lot of people use the saying, does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? And the beginning letter of each of those words will remind you the operation to do. So let's look at some examples. Here we have a problem 8 divided by 3. These digits represent something in a story problem. The 8 represents the number of hearts we have in all. We have 8 hearts. The 3 represents the number of hearts we're going to put in each group when we divide them. So we have 8 divided into groups of 3. So I'm just going to divide them by 3 right now and put them into groups of 3. I can't put these in a group of 3 because they're the leftovers. So we've actually done the first step of the algorithm, which is to divide. 8 divided by 3. The answer to 8 divided by 3 is 2 because we were able to make 2 full groups. I'm going to write the answer right here. And I'm going to go to the next step, which is multiply. So the number you just wrote becomes the number that you're going to multiply. So we just wrote a 2, so I'm going to multiply it by the divisor 3. So I'm going to do 2 times 3, which equals 6. And I'm going to write it, my answer, right here. The 6 represents the number of hearts that we were able to put in the group. So we started with 8. We used 6 of them by putting them into groups. And so we've done the divide and we've done the multiply. And now we're on the subtract step. We are going to subtract the number we just wrote by the original number of hearts. So we had 8 hearts. We were able to group 6 of them up. And if we subtract that, it's going to give us the number of hearts that were left. And if we look up here at our model, we can see that there were 2 hearts left. And that's what that 2 represents. The next step is going to be compare or check. And when you check, you're just looking at the last number you wrote, the 2, and making sure it's less than the divisor. If it was more than the divisor or equal to the divisor, you could have just made another group. 2 is less than 3, so we're done with that step. And the last step is to bring. We're going to bring that remainder up to here, or we're going to bring another digit of the dividend down. But we don't have that yet. So we're going to bring the remainder up here. And so we can see our answer is 2, remainder 2. So let's look at another example. This time we have the number 13 divided by 6. So we've set it up again where we have 13 hearts and we're going to divide them by 6. And this looks a little bit different, and that's because even though the dividend is 2 digits, the quotient or the answer is only going to be 1 digit. And that's because 6 cannot go into 1, or 1 cannot be divided by 6. So instead of looking at the 1, we're going to look at it as a 13. And so then when we start writing answers, they're all going to go above and below the 3 in 13. So let's go ahead and do the steps together. The first step is to divide. So I'm going to take my 13 and divide it by 6. So here I have one group of 6 and another group of 6. This is going to be a leftover. So my division answer is going to be 2 because 13 divided by 6 makes 2 groups. I'm going to put my answer 2 right above the digit I'm working with, 3. Okay, my next step is going to be to multiply. And I'm multiplying to figure out how many of the hearts actually went into a group. And so when I multiply, I need to multiply the number I just wrote, which stands for the number of groups, by 6, the number of hearts in a group. So 2 times 6 is 12. And I'm going to write my answer right underneath 13, keeping the place values lined up. If it was only a 1-digit answer, it would only use this place right here. But since it was a 2-digit answer, it used both places. Okay, so now I've multiplied. The next step is going to be to subtract, just to figure out what my remainder is. If I look over here, I can see that my remainder is 1. But when I subtract, that's what I get. So the answers that I'm writing have representations for the problem. The 2 represented the total number of groups. The 12 represented the hearts in a group, and the 1 represents the hearts that are not in a group. The next step of my algorithm is to check. So I'm looking at the 1 and checking to make sure it's less than 6. If it was more than 6, we would have just made another new group. Since it's less than 6, I'm ready to bring. I can either bring this number up in the remainder, or I can bring another digit from the dividend down. Well, there are no other digits in the dividend, so I'm going to bring this 1 up to end my problem and to show the remainder. So the answer is 2, remainder 1. So let's look at another example. This one is 32 divided by 7. So here I have 32 hearts, and the first step is to actually divide them. So I'm not going to be looking at the 3 because 3 cannot be divided by 7. So instead of doing a 0 and doing all the steps with zeros, we just look at the number as if it was 32. So 32 divided by 7. So I'm going to circle them up and put them in groups of 7. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I can't put those 4 in a group. So the number of groups I made when I divided was 4. So I'm going to write my answer not above the 3 because 7 cannot go into 3. It can go into 32. So I'm going to write my number above the 32. So my answer is 4 because I was able to make 4 groups. The next step is to multiply. We multiply to figure out how many hearts actually were in a group. So how we do that is we multiply the number of groups by the number of hearts in each group. So 4 times 7. So 4 times 7 is 28. So I'm going to write my 28 here. And that was my multiply. Now I'm on subtract. And the reason I'm subtracting is to find the number of leftovers, the number that did not go in a group. So I had 32 total, 28 of them are in a group, and if I subtract, I can find how many are not in a group. Okay, so I see that there are 4 of them not in a group, and if I look over here, I see that in my model too. 4 of them are not in a group. Now I'm going to compare and check that 4 is less than 7, so that's true, and the last step is to bring that digit somewhere. I'm either going to bring down another digit to keep working, or I'm going to bring it up as a remainder. Since there's no other digits to keep working, I know this 4 is going to be a remainder. So 32 divided by 7 is 4, remainder 4. All right, let's look at another problem. This time I have 9 divided by 2. Notice this one's back to just being one column, and that's because the first digit 9 can be divided by 2. So 9 divided by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put them into groups of 2. Okay, so my first step was to divide. I'm going to write my answer right above the number 9. Okay, now my next step is to multiply. We multiply to figure out how many hearts we were able to use in our division. So 4 times 2 is 8. 8 hearts went into a group. Notice where I wrote my answer, right? All of the answers stay in a straight line. Now I'm going to subtract to figure out the number that weren't in a group. So if I had 9 total and 8 went in a group, if I subtract them, I end up with 1. One of them is not in a group. Now I'm just going to check and make sure that this is less than my divisor, which it is. And so now I'm ready to bring it. I can either bring something down or bring my remainder all the way up. There's nothing to bring down, so I know I'm finished and my remainder goes up. So my answer is 4, remainder 1. For the next problems, we're not going to have the model. So let's just look at 23 divided by 5. We don't have a model to show, so you're going to have to do some of this work in your head or draw them out and make a model for yourself. But let's start with 23 divided by 5. I know I'm only going to have one round of the algorithm because I know my quotient's only going to have one answer. 2 cannot be divided by 5, so instead of looking at the 2, I'm going to have to look at the 23. And my answers are going to go above the 23 and below the 23, like that. Okay, remember the steps. The first one is to divide, so 23 divided by 5 is 4. So I'm going to write my answer, 4, right there. My next step is multiply. We multiply to figure out how many we were able to put into groups. So if we made 4 groups of 5, that means we had 20. So I'm going to write my 20, keeping it lined up with place value under the 23. So my 0 for the 20 would go there, and my 2 would go there. So 20 of them were able to group up evenly. Next step is to subtract to find the number that weren't able to be grouped up evenly. So if I subtract, I get 3. And 3 is the number that were not in a group, the remainders. So I'm going to compare and make sure the 3 is less than 5, which it is. So I know I'm done. There's nothing to bring down, so we're going to bring this 3 up. So my answer is 4, remainder 3. And let's do the last one just for a little bit of extra practice. If I look at the number 14, I see that this is only going to be a 1-digit quotient because 1 cannot be divided by 6. I need to look at the number as being 14. So my answers are going to go above and below the 4. The divide, the multiply, and the subtract answers will all be right here. So let's start with divide. 14 divided by 6 is 2. Next is multiply. 2 times 6 is 12. So I'm going to keep it lined up with place value. Next is subtract. So 14 minus 12 is 2. Okay, next is compare. 2 is less than 6, so we're good. And the last thing is to bring this 2 somewhere. I can either bring another digit from the dividend down, but there isn't one, so I'm going to take this 2 and bring it up to be the remainder. So my answer is 2, remainder 2. All right, you try some on your own, and if you need help, you can come back and rewatch the video. Good luck!